As many of you who follow my work probably know, I have a book out called Storm Dreams. What most of you probably don't know is that it was actually written off a short story I'd written several years before that. So I thought you guys might find it interesting. So today, I'm reading to you Storm Dreams, the short story. Black clouds rolled the storm in, overtaking the white and blue, turning the sky to soot and ash. Lightning gave electric veins to the darkening billows, and the following thunder added a voice. Out of the black and gray flew a zeppelin of the same storm colors. It looked more cloud than craft as the misty cotton tore around it. It's a fine storm, said Banner, turning the helm with one hand. The other shielded his eyes from the crackles of light as the craft dodged patches of electricity and slid along harsh updrifts. Cassidy leaned against an aluminum support beam, both grinning and grimacing at the same time. He watched Banner spin the wheel with the practiced recklessness of an old sea salt, with too many years under his belt to be too careful. The coffee-colored aviator's cap and caramel jacket reminded Cassidy of himself years before. But today he wore the clothes of a gentleman. Tan knickers, black boots, a white blouse and beige vest, though he still sported a brown bomber jacket over it all. Once a pilot, always a pilot. He followed Banner's movements in a sort of reverie now, the stalwart figure set against the raging atmosphere, breaking over him like a great stone in rushing water. It was a good storm, and inside Cassidy warmed. Then he winced. Something deep in the wind tugged at his throat, like a child on the hand of his father. A child bolting for the candy store or magic shop, as if it held the only cure for an ailment that would kill him if he visited one more barber shop or newsstand. It burned in his chest now, dripping heat into his stomach. He yearned for the something in the distant beyond, but it eluded him like peace and warmth and the fading memory of dry land. The gondola hugged the underbelly of the Zeppelin beast, creaking and shuddering with the violent drifts and currents. Where to next? Asked Jim, a young adventurer and recent addition to the crew. He already showed early signs of airsickness, despite his enthusiasm. Supplies, said Banner, deftly adjusting the wheel, as if repositioning a mug of dark lager. After entertaining those Russians last week, we're dangerously low on provisions. It was true, though the crazy Russians he spoke of were guests of a somewhat spectral nature, and Banner himself had done most of the drinking. So where are we going? Asked Jim again, still enthusiastic despite the pale countenance. I'm thinking Paris, Banner said, and sent a quick wink over his shoulder. They have the best wine, you know, and I'm in the mood for roast duck. Anyway, we're not far. Banner appeared entranced by the storm, but the thought of duck seemed to make him realize where they were. He checked a few instruments and tipped the Zeppelin downward. Gay Paris, he chuckled, and nosed the craft through a cloud of pitch blackness. As they pulled out of the dark, the familiar Paris skyline rose to meet them. Jim breathed harder and fidgeted as Banner maneuvered towards the Eiffel Tower. The dirigible slowed, drifted, and docked, its nose latching to the tip of the needle, something it did without any help of any kind. Cassidy imagined it must be a strange sight, the great airship tethered to the very symbol of France, like a hitching post, and 3 men descending a rope ladder in the howling wind. But then, no one would ever notice. Even in the real world, no one noticed dreams, unless dreams wanted to be noticed. We'll have to hurry, Banner snapped over his shoulder to Jim. We won't have long. We have to stay with the storm. Jim nodded as if he understood, and perhaps he did. He was a bright escapee. But what about the others? Jim asked, pinning his pork pie hat to his dark scalp as he ran. They stay with the ship, Cassidy hollered over the roar of the rain and wind. Come on! They found a small shop 3 blocks from the tower. Le Shop, Banner called it, but the sign said something much longer, which probably meant the same thing. Cassidy approached the door as the others stood aside. A gentle wave of his hand over the lock, and the door swung open. Jim grinned at Cassidy's little trick, and they entered. Banner filled a knapsack with bags of sugar, coffee, flour, and 2 plump ducks hanging in the window. Cassidy grabbed a new lantern and some long underwear, while Jim went straight for the wine and fine chocolates. The rain wasn't falling hard. They had to hurry. Not that wine, Banner said, pointing at the shelf Jim was reaching towards. Grab the good stuff. We need to celebrate. Jim shrugged and grabbed 2 bottles labeled Bordeaux 1922. After double-checking with each other, which included Banner disapproving of Jim's second choice and picking out something himself, and a final glance around the shop, Banner dropped a pile of francs on the counter and turned to the door. A bolt of lightning lit up the room. 2 men wearing filthy coats stood in the doorway, eyeing the supplies and money. They weren't real men. Mid wouldn't have noticed a group of escaped dreams. These creatures were something else the storm had attracted. Fortunately, they looked more like thieves than bounty hunters. The man on the right straightened his lapels, trying to look genteel. My dear sir, is that real money? Banner looked indignant. Of course it's real money. Out of our way. Real money. So it won't turn to smoke the minute you leave. Oh, I could use some real money. We could use supplies as well, he said, acknowledging his colleague for the first time. The other man seemed grateful for being noticed. He tipped his hat and slid a knife from his coat. Jim began fidgeting while Banner stood like a statue, his knuckles wide around the strap of his knapsack. Cassidy lay partially in Banner's shadow, where he had already unholstered a German Mauser the moment the lightning struck. As the first thief reached beneath his coat, Banner leapt to the side, pinning Jim down. Cassidy opened fire. The thief, with his hand in his coat, clutched his chest and sank to the wooden floor. A revolver clattered beside him. Cassidy said nothing, but his stern eyes told the other man to leave. And the man did, without a whimper or a look back at his fallen comrade. What about the body? Jim asked as they closed the door and headed back for the tower. It'll fade as the storm ends, Banner said, rushing into the fading wind. Now hurry, it won't be long. They'd wasted too much time in the shop, and Cassidy felt the electric atmosphere thinning. Bits of sky showed through the clouds, and the rain was now a mere drizzle, dripping off the sides of the gray Zeppelin. The great dirigible drifted, moored to the tower's tip like a monstrous balloon held by a toothpick giant. Banner was already halfway up the ladder, with Jim close behind. Cassidy gave a final glance to the city and wished he could see it on a sunny day. But Banner was already to the top and shouting for him to jump on. Cassidy controlled the longing in his chest and grabbed for the swaying ladder. It had never been so hard to hang on to the rungs, and he realized his grip was fading with the storm. He was being pulled one way and the ladder the other, as the shifting wind tore at reality. In the storm, everything was solid, a haven between the real world and the soft dream stuff of which he was made. The ladder was real, and he wasn't. He hated remembering the fact, as its very realness tried to buck him off now. Climb, damn it, climb! Banner screamed from above. Cassidy shrugged off the supplies he carried and lurched upwards. The pack crashed to the ground, the lantern shattering as he flew up the rungs, keeping track of them by feel alone. The rainwater made them slick, and in a moment he was dangling by one arm. The Zeppelin pulled away from the great tower and began its journey back into the nexus of the storm. Cassidy felt the ladder being pulled upwards, rolled onto a wooden drum by a two-man crank far above. Instead of trying to climb any further, he wrapped his legs through the ropes and around the rungs, clinging to the ship's umbilical cord. Cutting wind and freezing rain ravaged his numb body as the craft dragged him back into the storm. He closed his eyes and felt the ladder more solid now, still whipping in the wind like the tail of a beheaded serpent, but firm and real. The clinking of the crank grew louder. Arms wrapped around his and hoisted him into the gondola. Cassidy laid panting on the hard wood, eyes still closed, feeling old. How many years had he flown with Banner? And today, Cassidy! Jim's earnest voice pleaded as he shook Cassidy's limp shoulders. "I'm all right," he murmured. "Just let me lie here." They let him lie, and he wept silently. Something felt very wrong. He just wasn't young inside anymore. Not 3 years before, he would have been up into the gondola before Banner could even catch up, heckling him the whole way. Now the deep lines of his face tugged at his sagging eyelids. Banner never got old, never felt old, never was old. Break. A burst of light appeared deep in the clouds. Jim and Cassidy moved up beside Banner at the wheel. "The Northern Lights," Jim whispered. "Aurora Borealis," Banner corrected, preferring the more exotic term. Cassidy just stared. A deep emptiness already welled inside, and the closer the colors came, the bigger the emptiness grew. The black clouds were gone now, and the sky swam with color. Blues, greens, reds, and deep purples bathed the craft, slipping through the glass and aluminum barriers into the cabin. Banner held the wheels straight in limp hands as his glassy eyes stared deep into the new heavens. Even on a ship like this, the effect was new and amazing each time. They'd traveled the lights before, followed them to forgotten islands and continents and worlds, but today the colors were just playing with them. Nothing substantial enough for even a dream to touch, just a tease of soft realities. In the distance, shadows appeared in the rainbow clouds, and Cassidy's stomach twisted. As they neared, the shadows became sharper, peaks and squares and rounded towers. It was a city, stretching across the Borealis as if lost in the color. The image sunk into Cassidy's belly, and he shuddered as the towers and spires faded when the great storm ship touched them. It crumbled like a castle of fine dust, meeting a breeze that became a wind as they passed. The lights faded, and the ship flew gray skies again. Cassidy slumped against the support rail and closed his eyes. "What's wrong?" asked Jim as he came out of his trance. "It was a dream," Cassidy said in a far-off tone. "I've seen that city before, and I've never been able to touch it." Jim shrugged. "It was just a mirage." "I wish I'd stayed," said Cassidy. Not to Jim, but to the passing winds. Banner turned now and looked hard at him. "Cassidy? I wish I'd jumped back there and fallen in a window or through a roof or into the streets for all I care. I miss it. Damn it. I've always missed it." Jim squirmed. He shook his head and sat down in the chair. "It's just a mirage." Cassidy held himself with both arms, clutching his knees to his chest. "It's not a mirage. It's a dream. And we're nothing but dreams. All three of us, and the others in the back too. We've made this ship a dream as well, and one no one will ever remember." Banner turned back to the helm, but his hand shook. Jim stood, joined Banner at the wheel, and tried to appear unfazed, staring down the oncoming horizon. Cassidy dragged himself to his quarters. He couldn't blame Jim for not wanting to remember. The young man was all young and happy. He would follow Banner to hell like the rest of the crew. It wasn't long ago Cassidy himself would have done the same. Without undressing, he flipped the latch, holding his bed against the wall. It swung down. Cassidy crawled in and pulled the covers over his head. All he saw against the back of his eyelids were the spires of the dream city. He'd probably lived there once, or at least visited before the escape. Perhaps he'd loved someone there. Perhaps had a home, a family. Something about slipping into the real world took the memories away. They were just soft pictures in the back of his head now, begging to be heard, but with no chance of ever becoming solid. Damn, why had he left? There must have been a reason. All he remembered well was following Banner up the ladder and into the storm for the first time. Something about fire and thunder. Something about Cassidy to the helm. The intercom blared into his room. His eyes sprung open. He'd been dreaming. How could dreams dream? Cassidy! It wasn't Jim or any of the other crew. It was Banner himself. Banner, not sounding at all like Banner. Panicked. Panicked or excited, Cassidy could never tell. What? Cassidy started to say as he cleared the bridge's threshold, but stopped when two biplanes peeled out of the oncoming clouds. They've already made 2 runs so far, Banner said, his voice steely now, like his eyes as he gripped the helm. 1 over, 1 under. They look like Fokker 7s, Cassidy said, approaching Banner's side. New ones, Banner added. Jim's face was white. Pirates? Banner shrugged. Pirates are bounty hunters. Only difference is whether they want us or their ship. The fighters split up this time and put the gondola through a double flyby. Jim ducked instinctively, but straightened fast when he noticed the others hadn't flinched. Banner rubbed his chin. They're trying to find a way to disable the engines without blowing us up. Are they real? Jim asked. Real? No. Banner started chewing a thin cigar without lighting it. But they're real enough to us. He turned to Cassidy. Does Brewster still have that Lewis gun? Yeah, but he can only get one before the other gets pissed, decides we're not worth taking in, and lights us up like a Roman candle. Cassidy paused, running options in his head. I've got a good scope on my Mauser rifle. Banner gave a sharp nod. I'll keep this ship steady as I can. Cassidy headed for his quarters. He'd only have one good shot. The Spandau gun on a Fokker could tear a target the size of a Zeppelin to a burning mass with a few well-aimed bursts. Within a minute, he was at the starboard window, just off the galley. He realized for the first time just how fast his pulse was racing. He panted and slunk against the wall. Not like Banner anymore, he thought. Forget the endless strength. Off your butt, old man, Brewster said, rounding the corner with his Lewis cradled in both arms. Brewster could talk to him like that, being roughly the same age. But even old Brewster seemed to have more energy. How old am I really? Cassidy thought. How old is a dream? He pried himself from the useless thoughts and slapped Brewster on the leg. Just make sure you down your man with that monster of yours. The Lewis gun was a monster. It looked like a giant metal tube on the end of a pistol grip rifle and fired shells from a 97-round cylindrical magazine. A hell of a gun to be sure, but for himself, Cassidy preferred a one-shot scenario. Brewster squatted and took a few needed breaths while the great cannon rested against his shoulder. When we open the window, the wind's gonna kick us on our butts. Cassidy agreed. Banner's slowing up. He'll stop. They'll assume we're surrendering. Just make sure you wait until we get both planes at once. As if on cue, loud props buzzed by on another pass. The Zeppelin slowed, and Brewster hoisted the Lewis gun into position, propping the folding bipod against the edge of the window. Holding the Zeppelin still or not, the storm gusted in on them. Cassidy pulled flight goggles over his eyes and took up position several windows down. Sliding out the bolt, he checked his rounds and chambered the first. He hoped the pilots wouldn't see him and decide to attack from above instead. A definite disadvantage to Zeppelins was you couldn't see anything overhead. Both fighters had gone aft. If they had been the old two-seaters, the observer in the forward seat would have had a good chance at spotting him and Brewster. Hopefully the single-seated Fokker would work in their favor. Brewster hollered something over the rush of wind. Cassidy peeked over the edge of the window to see one of the planes on its way back around. He crossed himself, not knowing quite what it meant, but he'd seen plenty of others make the same motion. Remember to wait, he thought, watching Brewster peer down the sight of his monster gun. The fighter edged closer. Wait for the other one, Brewster. The monster spoke, spewing .303 caliber fire that slammed into the slowing Fokker. The fighter seemed unaffected for a moment, then burst into flames and fell into a nosedive. Damn! Cassidy leveled his rifle out the window and searched for the second plane. Brewster knows better. What the hell? A second glance told him Brewster was panicking, running his sights across the sky in a wild figure eight. Cassidy turned back to his scope, which showed nothing but the interior design of black cumulus and the possible beginnings of violent supercell clouds. Cassidy wrenched the scope off his rifle and switched to a field sight. This was going to be a close shot now. No time to get that Fokker that far out. He'd have to take it down the moment it showed. He adjusted the sight for 100 yards and hoped for the best. Brewster was firing again, tearing another hole in the sky at 12 o'clock. The second Fokker was there, closing in on the Zeppelin from 2 o'clock. Its Spandau rattling lead between its props. The Spandau lived up to its nickname, the Devil's Paintbrush, painting the Zeppelin's gondola from galley along the side and down to Brewster's position with a barrage of rattling bullets. Brewster tore into patches of red. The Lewis gun crashed to the floor, emptying several shells through the cabin's hull. The Zeppelin lurched. Cassidy fell, sprawling across the hard wood, the Mauser rifle clacking beside him. He threw himself back to his feet, steadying his weight against the support beam. The Mauser felt alien to his shaking hands as the buzzing continued towards him and let spew another burst of fire. All he could see in the center of the sight was spinning props and a blur behind them. Wind buffeted his goggles. No way to see ahead for sure. No way to know if his round would make it through the props. He squeezed. The fighter dipped below the car, heading for the other side. Did it hit? Cassidy yanked the bolt back and chambered another round, while sprinting for the port windows. Only the galley and a few cabins in the way. Tables, chairs, doors. Some he thrust aside, bouncing them away with his shins and hands. He met the window on the opposite side at a heaving sprint. The muzzle of the rifle shattered the glass, the stock already shouldered, sight line searching. Had he hit? No. The fighter buzzed from underneath, banking sharp. Images whirled through his sight, spinning prop, upper wing, tight leather cap. He squeezed the trigger. Red. The Fokker dipped, rolling out of control, and dove for Earth. Cassidy watched it plummet. Imagined the explosion far below as the tiny craft shattered against the ground. Brewster's body was nothing but shredded flesh, slowly fading from reality. Cassidy tried to scoop the parts together as the flesh, blood, and bone glowed a faint magenta and dissolved into the deck. Tears flowed down Cassidy's cheeks as the last bit of Brewster's face vanished from view, his cold eyes open and empty as they slipped into nothingness. Break. Cassidy's hand still shook as he opened the door to Banner's quarters. Banner rose from his desk and clapped Cassidy's shoulders with both hands. "My God, man, I forgot how damned well you shoot that thing. Cassidy couldn't smile. He slumped into an armchair and stared blankly at the silver globe, which turned without power on the shelf beside a copy of Around the World in 80 Days. What's wrong, man? Banner asked, his thin mustache leveling to a straight line as he smiled. You're the old girl's pride when you fire that thing. Cassidy sighed. How long have I flown with you? He asked, looking into the captain's leather boots. 10 years, 20, 100? I don't know. But you're the best I've got. God, you should have seen the look on Jim's face when that fighter dove for hell. Banner pulled Cassidy's face up so he could see the tight leather of Banner's fist shaking in the air. He had that look you used to have when fighters sucked the sharp end of... He stopped and took a step back. You're crying. Cassidy, where's my Cassidy? Cassidy started to wipe his face, but stopped. I don't know how long I've flown with you, because I have trouble remembering yesterday, and the day before. There's a lot I know, but very little I really remember. He hugged himself and felt like throwing up. Turbulence he wasn't used to noticing pitched the Zeppelin across the blinding storm outside. I know you picked me up out of a dream about the same time as Brewster, but for the life of me, I can't remember what dream it was anymore. I can't remember who I know there, who I loved, if I had kids or a family. He stared at the clouds outside the window, his vision blurred. And then I saw that dream we sailed through the other day. It tugged at me like an anchor caught in rocks, and I can't forget those spires and towers. And the colors, Captain. I've seen nothing but rain and storm since I met you. Banner's smile was gone, his eyes distant and gray. It's faith, man. Faith that keeps us alive and free. It's all any of us have, and it keeps us out of the mind that dreamed us. He stooped and peered deep into Cassidy's eyes. I'm no different from the rest of you. A god of a man dreamed me eons ago. A man so filled with the need for independence and indignation that I sprang up from his unconscious mind one night. I took the helm of a Spanish galleon, sailed to the edge of reality, off into the sunset and into this world of dreamers and gods. Hell, I've been rescuing boys like you ever since, and sailing the black storms of hot electric buzz that keeps this ship and our minds intact. It lets us live as free men in a reality we were never allowed to touch or even dream about. We blinked in and out of existence in a world made by men who didn't even care what happened to us when we woke. Gods that turned their backs in the mornings and went on with their dreary lives without a second thought of their creations abandoned in the night. Damn it, man, we're the stuff of legends now, the pride of reality's fringes. We've dodged the hunters and villains that skirt the edges of the world, pulled in and out of the black clouds of electric heat these mad storms generate. We're survivors, man, survivors. Don't tell me you don't feel that. Cassidy didn't feel it. He didn't feel anything. All he could see in his mind's eye was the fading corpse of Brewster and the misty spires and towers of a distant shattered dream. He tried to focus on Banner's piercing eyes through the haze of burning tears and pain. I need to know where Brewster went. Is he back in a dream? Or did he fall into some abyss of time? Did he plummet into Nietzsche's void, lost forever in the hull of Neverborn? Who are we? What are we? Banner slumped against the desk. For a moment he faded and was back. He put a hand out as if driving Cassidy away against the wall. The Zeppelin lurched and began to plummet. Cassidy's stomach lurched as well. Screams came from the cabin next door as desks and chairs slid across the floor. Banner fell, his body blinking in and out of existence as he met the polished wood. His leather flight jacket slipped into the surface as if it wasn't there. The Zeppelin dove, barreling towards Earth through clouds and rain and empty air. Banner, it seemed, had been the only thing keeping the ship aloft. Cassidy was fading too, and the screams from next door were going on and off now, reality unraveling around them, even as they raced for terminal velocity. Banner's expression steeled, and he slammed his gloved hand against the slats, pushing himself back to his feet. He stood and smiled, and the Zeppelin righted itself, gaining altitude again, as the lightning outside lit up the cabin with an explosive burst of white glare. The blast shone in Banner's electric blue eyes, the same hue as the storm's rage, and his body was solid again, stout and real and grinning his wicked grin. Not today, Cassidy. I may eventually go down in a gust of doubt, but not today. Not while you're here, and Jim, and the rest of them, and this airship is beneath my feet. He grabbed Cassidy by the shoulders and stood him up, shaking him with tight leather hands. You're alive! You're alive, and so am I. It's faith that keeps us standing in a world of subtlety and doubt, and I want you to feel it. Feel the storm in your blood. Touch the freedom against your skin. This is the reality we chose to live, and this is the only God we need. He gripped Cassidy by the folds of his jacket and dragged him out the door and down the hall, all the way to the helm. Everyone was already there, waiting for their captain to steer, and Banner took the wheel in hand like the reins of a hungry stallion. He spun it hard. The whistling spokes blurred by and the craft torqued to the right, sailing into the blackest head of rolling clouds. No man of mine goes down on ship, he said as blue crackles split the air across the sky. If it's a dream you want, a dream you'll get. Cost and risk be damned. And he did risk. Planes filled the air as they dove through the dark space into the very heart of a child's dream. Airships and balloons the size of mountains closed in at their tail as the powers that be sensed their presence in the world of dream and sent everything they had at Banner Zeppelin and its crew. But the Kaplan sailed like a man gone mad, something dark and beautiful inside his being, raging against the walls and trenches and beliefs of doubt and reason. Over the sands of Arabian deserts, he turned into a rising dust storm and met it head on. The gusting winds raked the ship with grains of blasting sand, but something in his very will kept it solid and unyielding as the pursuing crafts dissipated, some lost, some destroyed, some banking to overfly the torrential winds. Banner tore into the storm as if the Zeppelin was native, surfing its gusts and flurries like a ship on guiding waves, riding a tsunami all the way to the shore. The desert gave way to cities, both young and old. Skyscrapers and pyramids vied for prominence in a skyline of future and past run together and melding into dreams of their own beside the fleeting dreams of others. Cassidy cried, then laughed as they sailed between the colored spirals of the castle he'd seen in the clouds, and bit back a cry of glee as Banner steered into a group of attacking planes and balloons that flew from behind a mountain in the sky, knocking them out of the air with the side of the Zeppelin's hull. Banner's will seemed to steel it to all attacks here in dream, guns and shrapnel, as his wild heart drove them forward, from dream to dream to dream. Jim laughed. The others laughed. Cassidy laughed, and lightning covered Banner's stalwart body in cracks of blue and white as he spun the wheel. The black heels of his leather boots rooted to the deck, as if there was no separation between his soul and that of the diving ship. Back into reality they flew, breaching the borders of time and space and dream and reality, as if skimming the edge of sandbars and islands in an ocean greater than the mind of man. Cassidy was alive. He didn't care how. Didn't care for how long or what his origin had been. He was alive, and so was Jim, and so were the others. And Banner? Banner was something else. Something other than what the rest of them could ever be. A will, a force of love and belief none of them could ever touch. And what reason would there be to even try? It was enough to stand at his side as he manned the helm, shouting his orders and smiling his banner smile as lightning lit up his eyes and the white of his teeth. Together we sailed the rifts of time, the wars of man, the cities of dream. Though we could be seen or unseen, the very real Zeppelin, held together by Banner's will, poked out of the clouds from time to time. A ghostly ship of the should-be-dead. We were fired upon by both Americans and Germans and Brits and Japanese and those we couldn't identify. They would never know who we were and never care. We were the weathered Zeppelin, crafted and painted all the colors of raging clouds, the stuff of dreams and legend. We were the souls escaped and free, the lost and never found, the silent flight, the storm dreams. And remember, if you guys enjoyed this, please hit like, hit the little bell icon up there so you know when I put out more content, and please subscribe to my channel. And if you really enjoyed this story, you'll probably enjoy the book. So hit the link below, find it on Amazon, buy a copy, and please leave a review. I can really use all the reviews I can get. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys on the next one.